What's going on, guys? Brandon here with Texas Revving with a really long overdue video, and I'm going to finally be comparing the two GT500s I have of two very different generations, just one generation apart, but what a huge change between the 2014 SVT GT500 and 2021 Ford Performance GT500. Many of which are just technical differences you guys probably already know, but I don't want to dive into that too much. I'll go as much as I can off the top of my head anyway, just from the heart, no script here. But mostly we're just going to go ahead and just give a quick rip in both of these. And I want to talk about more so driving impressions, just as an enthusiast, what another enthusiast can expect without getting behind the wheel of both of these. Maybe you have, maybe you've gotten behind the wheel of one of them, maybe you own one or considering another. And oddly enough, some people have been in between these two. I'm fortunate enough to have them both, but I think they're so different from each other, you should probably know which one you want because they're just such different cars entirely. And so I'm going to try to highlight that more than the technical side. I'll probably start with the SVT generation, the 2014, because it's earlier, so we'll go old to new. Well, in fact, before we even dive into each car, let's just acknowledge how good they look individually and especially together. Very patriotic in the red, white, and blue going on here. Let's start with the 2014 SVT GT500. This is the S197 chassis, and I think the first year of this chassis, I believe, they had a GT500. But this is really more so a two-year vehicle in the sense that 2013-14 had massive differences, mostly in the heart of it, the engine being the 5.8 liter. We'll dive into it, crack the hood in just a little bit here. But yeah, this is a GT500 that's more so fair to say it's a two-year run. 13-14 had this spec sheet of GT500. And by the way, quick pause, it is hot outside. I feel like I'm getting burnt, yet look at this, the rain is coming down. So Texas in June, you are confused. Okay. In any case, the ruby red metallic tri-coat looks freaking gorgeous in any lighting, but right now with the sun especially. Okay, so going back to it, this is 2014. 13-14 had the change of a few things here. Prior to this, they had the 5.4 liter supercharged V8. For the last 2 years of this chassis, they really wanted to, go out with a bang. Carroll Shelby had passed away in 2012, but he did know about this, which is kind of special for this car, being that in 2012, the specs were already kind of out of what the 13-14 was going to be. And that is a 5.8 liter supercharged V8 that put out at the time, I think it was the most powerful production V8 at the time, a decade ago, a little over a decade ago, actually. That being said, it's 662 horsepower, which in itself is a very big number. But when you consider other things like the tires that it runs on, I believe it's 265 up front, but it is rear wheel drive and it's just a 285 out there. I did replace them with Cup 2s, but it came with some not so fantastic supercar tires. I think they were literally called Goodyear Supercar or something like that. In any case, they just weren't great tires. Another thing is, this is the last generation of GT500 with a solid rear axle, not independent rear suspension. And so that much horsepower out of that narrow of a tire with bad compound and a live rear axle or solid rear axle was something else. Another thing to mention too is no transmission option. You only got that guy right there. Good old classic 6-speed manual transmission. And this car really would not have been suited any other way. If this thing had an automatic option, I don't even care if it was a dual clutch. Not that that was even readily accessible in a car of this price a decade ago, but even then, wouldn't have made sense. This is through and through the last iteration of a muscle car, in my honest opinion. Not just the GT500, but anything of the S197 chassis with a manual and a V8 is truly, I think, the last, classic feeling Mustang with a little bit of modern amenities, being that it was only 10 years ago they stopped making these things. And this last of the S197 Mustangs was kind of made to look like an older Mustang. So with that said, the day it came out, it looked good, and now a decade later, it doesn't look old or any older than it is because it was kind of meant to look like a retro car. And that goes for the outside and the inside. So as you can see, decade old tech in the sense that it is a key, not a fob. It says SVT for a special vehicle team. And so we'll go ahead and unlock it. I will say, even though it is a decade old, it was kind of early with these cool LED lights, the two lines up here. And then also 13-14s had the kind of black tail lights with the red lines running through it like so. Absolutely love it. This design came out when I was in high school, and I thought it was just the coolest thing all this time later. And I still think it's so freaking cool. But like I said, going into the interior, it looks very retro. Back in 2013-14, they knew it looked older than it was, but in the right way. Cue ball kind of shifter, these lines on the ribbed leather. I mean, everything looks pretty old school. Only differences here is a different intake. I think that's from the Ford Performance catalog. Intake resonator delete from the Ford Performance catalog. and then a JLT oil separator just on the passenger side, just for the health of the supercharger. Otherwise, this thing's totally stock, minus the exhaust, but nothing really to add crazy amounts of performance or anything. In any case though, seeing that displacement out of a Mustang's pretty darn cool. 5.8 liter, and everything since then has only been smaller, but yeah, just cool bragging right nonetheless. And then since I mentioned it, this thing stock sounded really good, like your favorite song, only on volume 5, and you really wanted to crank it up. So it wasn't too loud, but the tone was great. I ended up putting some Borla attacks on there, and the tone itself is arguably not quite as good as factory, but the volume's up there, so it kind of evens out. The benefit of the stock exhaust being quieter was you got a lot of supercharger whine. That induction sound was almost, I don't know, close to Hellcat levels. I mean, something about the SVT generation of supercharged cars and Lightnings and stuff like that really had a whine to them. Kind of lost that upping the exhaust track, but you know, can't complain too much. That's how it's set up right now. Just thought I'd mention that. But yeah, that 5.8 liter is a thing of beauty. It was dubbed the Trinity engine, and pretty much what it was rather than, you know, boring out the engine, they instead just replaced the liners that took up some of the displacement and infused the cylinder walls with plasma. And I know I've said that before and it sounds like I'm just making stuff up. I'm regurgitating information I found online. That's some crazy space tech right there that they're just throwing into a GT500 that started for less than $60,000. In fact, I think at the start of it, it might have been closer to around the $50,000 starting price. A huge bragging point to mention here is it is still to this day the fastest Mustang ever produced from the factory. When I say fastest, I do mean in top speed, not acceleration. Just not a whole lot of aero on it, not a whole lot of canards and big wing or nothing like that. In fact, they kind of just removed the grill here just to get as much just cooling as possible. Kind of a notable feature about this generation GT500. That being said, Ford apparently got 202 mile an hour at the Nardo test track in Italy. So honestly, it's probably one of the less expensive ways to get into the stock car 200 mile an hour club. This car back a decade ago in 2014 MSRP'd for right around the $60,000 mark, 60,000 and change. Some people were able to get them for sticker. Looking on some forums, it looks like most people were paying about $5,000 over MSRP. So, you know, anywhere from that 65,000 and slightly above range. Some people paid even more. Back in neutral. Good old 10-year Ford chime right there. Get a little intro screen. Got to say that you're going to obey some laws or whatever that is. Here's where we start looking like it's a 10-year-old car. It's not unusable. I'm not trying to overly defend the car, but I mean, this isn't bad. But at the same time, it's just not why I buy something like this. Probably not why you're gonna buy this either. You really buy this for getting a newer, old school muscle car that happens to have 662 horsepower, and because it's, well, the SVT GT500. A lot of reasons to buy this. Interior, tech, probably not one of them, but that's okay by me. It definitely works, and I'll even say this has got the tech pack or whatever they called it at the time, and the sound system's actually really, really good. Connect your phone to Bluetooth, it still has that, but navigation, all that stuff, I don't even try. It has it says nav. It doesn't have a rear view backup camera, and this is the most equipped one you could have got with this size screen, which for 10 years ago, not bad, actually pretty good, but things have come a long way. Where I'm not gonna complain about the lack of tech is right here, analog gauges. I'm not saying I prefer one over the other, but I find myself a lot of times kind of missing analog gauges, both in this car and in my truck, where I used to have a 2014 Raptor, now I have the 24 Raptor, and you have a big screen here. Something about analog gauges and actual sweeping needles is just so right to me. Hilariously enough, you do have rear seats. I think I've only ever used them one time, but they are back there, and I love that they still have the white lines down the ribbed leather. But in any other case, not a whole lot to go over here. Let's go ahead and do the same walk around with the Ford Performance GT500, then we'll start driving. All right, and from old to new, that's what a generational difference looks like in the keys. So let's go ahead and grab this one. So again, without getting too into the technical side of things, but of course I'll hit the, you know, heavy hitting parts that you guys may already know. 10 years difference. It is, as you would expect, up in horsepower. It's got 98 horsepower more, meaning it's 760 horsepower. And totally different heart of an engine as well. In fact, the source of it really is when they went to the 5.2 liter for the GT350. Now that was a flat plane crank, naturally aspirated engine, something of absolute freaking beauty. I think to this day, still the most powerful naturally aspirated engine Ford's ever made. Now they took that same 5.2 engine block, knew that they were going to supercharge it for the GT500 generation, and to do that, they went from flat plane to cross plane, got a little bit more strength out of it, and then supercharged it with this big old supercharger. And so totally different engine from this. Similar heart to the 350. I'm pointing at a garage door. In any case, totally different engine, but found a way to get 760 horsepower, which respect to Ford, because when they were teasing this thing, they were saying it's going to be over 700 horsepower. Nobody knew if that was going to be 705, 710. It was 760, so way over what people were expecting. Now, power on paper is one thing, but how it feels and how much of that power you can use is a totally different. And you feel like you could use way more of this car's 760 than you feel like you could use of this car's 662. And the big difference is in that rear axle. Whereas we have a live rear axle or solid rear axle, this one is an IRS, but one that you actually like. The IRS in that it's independent rear suspension. And this just puts the power down significantly better. That's not to say that this is worse. This just puts the power down better. So that just means two different driving experiences. Sometimes you're in the mood for that flavor. Sometimes it's this one. I'm not trying to make it sound like one's better than the other. Technically, this one is, but you just might like the taste of an old school muscle car that likes to slide the tail end out. That one's way better at donuts and burnouts and all that stuff. But this one is just a way more capable car that corners better, puts the power down better. And the last big thing I'll say, technically, is this right here. Whereas you had no transmission option there, 6-speed manual only, you also had no transmission option here, and that was a dual clutch paddle shift transmission only. Now, when that was unveiled, that was pretty saddening for a lot of people, and to this day, it still might be. Now, as someone who is a huge fan of a manual transmission, the news of this one hit me a little differently because at the time I didn't own that car, but I did have, and I still do own, the GT350, which was manual transmission only. And so at the time I couldn't quite justify buying one of these. Money and space was a concern. This was back in, late 2019. And when I heard about it though, I still wanted this car because I thought how cool of a world would that be where I could have a manual GT350 and a paddle shift dual clutch, not just boring paddle shift, but like a dual clutch, supercharged, way more on horsepower and everything, but go back and forth between a manual and a dual clutch, both with Shelby Mustangs that are very different from each other. So that was a dream from 2019 and finally came true. We're not talking about the 350, we're talking about the 500. So in that sense, if you're talking about trying to buy your only recreational car, maybe you have a truck that you're daily driving, you want the weekend car, I could understand why people still want this as a manual. This does not need to be an automatic by any means. I don't care if it's dual clutch or whatever, that has to be a manual. Whereas this, I could understand it, but from my experience, knowing that I can still scratch that manual itch because I'm fortunate enough to do so, this thing to me as a paddle shift with a Tremec 7-speed, honestly, freaking perfect. Would I like to experience one with a manual? Sure. But at that point, they would start becoming a little bit more redundant, whereas the three that I have now, this thing really stands out as this one feels more like muscle car, because it totally is, and this starts scratching a little bit of that supercar itch. So those are the bigger differences. Transmission, manual, automatic, more power, as you would expect, independent rear suspension, solid rear axle. That's the big takeaway. Another thing about that to drive home the fact that that's more muscle car, this is a more supercar, is the tire as well. Tires in the decade got so much better, but they went with something completely different in the sense that this is 305 up front, which is plenty wide. And then this is 315 in the rear. So that should really drive home the fact that this is meant to do more than the straight line stuff that Shelbys or Mustangs in general have been known for. But yeah, just getting visible carbon fiber wheels on a Mustang. I don't care if it's a Shelby or not. I don't care if it's a GT500. It's still a Ford Mustang, as indicated from the center cap there. And just getting that option at all is really cool. That also included a carbon fiber interior, which I'll show you in a second, and a big old carbon fiber wing, all visible carbon fiber. If the camera will pick that up. Actually, trying to go in the same order before we climb on to the inside, I'll go ahead and pop the engine bay on this guy as well. So you pull a lever there, you hit the driver's side first right here, then the passenger side right there, then you have one more lock, and then no stick, it's just on hydraulics, and there we go. Now this one here is bone stock, nothing to the engine, nothing to the exhaust, absolutely not a thing, just some paint protection film, so nothing performance-wise. And so there we go, very, very nicely tight fit. I like that they don't put a whole lot of plastics over it, same goes with that. I mean, Ford just doesn't really tend to do that in general with their performance cars. Still put the hand built with pride with a little embossed signature there. Just really, really cool. And I don't know how it took this long, but I just now noticed I still have some of the protective little paper covers here. All right, just because you guys are watching, you guys leave a like for this one. I know it's oddly satisfying all these years later. All right, removed and removed. I'm not concerned about the next owner because I'm not selling it. All right, that's satisfying. Ooh, that looks nice. Another thing to mention options wise, and this kind of explains how the prices got the way they did. You had an option of no stripes or vinyl stripes. And the vinyl stripes, if I had a guess, throwing a random number out there, probably $700 to $1,000. This right here had options of no stripes, vinyl stripes, which were $1,000, or Another hard to get option was the painted stripes. And you could tell they're painted when they don't have a gap here. Usually you would have the body color right here, so a little bit of white, but these are the Kona blue painted stripes. And no matter what color you got, these were a $10,000 option. And so that was able to get the MSRP quite high on some of these. Now these started right around the low 80s, maybe high 70s or so. And for that, you got the essentials. You got the engine and transmission and the big old tires. I mean, pretty freaking awesome. But once you went carbon fiber track pack and the painted stripes, they started getting anywhere from about, 106 or so to the last year, 2022. It went to about $110,000. This got debuted in 2019, but the first production model year was 2020. They went to 21, and then the last year was 2022. So it was a 3-year run. I don't remember production numbers off the top of my head, so I'll go ahead and display them here. Now this was actually optioned with a soft top convertible, although few were optioned that way. I think a good 80% of them were the hard top coupes like this. So I'll go ahead and throw them over each car's total. That includes all the convertibles and the carbon fiber and non-carbon fiber track packs. Just total GT500s for 13, 14, and 20 through 22. I'll put them overhead right now. But yes, that is one thing to note, back in 2013-14, that was a high 50s or low 60s $1,000 car. And then this right here, totally different ball game in the sense that it is a different car, but you really couldn't snag one of these for, anything less than the low 80s if you were lucky enough to get one at MSRP and all that kind of stuff. Because in that sense, the market changed like crazy. People paid either sticker or $5,000, then it came down to this. People were paying up towards of $10, $15, $20, $25,000 over sticker, sometimes even more if they really had like money to blow. So in some, not all cases, but in some, you could have almost bought 2 of those for one of these. Again, that's kind of, very, very few cases. But that being said, quite a price difference, but it is 2 very, very different cars. Let's go ahead and climb in here. Totally different ball game as far as the interior. Those have more forgiving seats for larger gentlemen, and these are definitely the Recaros. Well, I think they're both Recaros, but these are definitely more bolstered up. You could just tell right here. A lot of Alcantara, not full leather. That goes to the steering wheel as well. All the carbon fiber, this was part of the pack. But as you can see, something missing right here for most. But for me, I was okay with it because I could still drive another manual. And I just got to the point to where I absolutely freaking love this car with the paddle shifters. Go ahead and start it up. Fair warning, it is warm. I drove it to the gym earlier, and it's probably gonna start with the exhaust valves kind of closed, but we'll try it out. Still sounds so good. Now, as you see, analog sweeping gauges, not so much. They're there, but they're in the form of like, just a screen. That doesn't bother me. I don't want it to sound like they ever bother me. I just like the idea of analog gauges like the old 500 or like the GT350 has. But this is configurable in the sense that I could go to, let's say, normal, then sport, or we could go to track, and that looks more like this. So modular and configurable, that's pretty cool. Track only, sure thing. But then again, this is the tech I really like. This is way more user-friendly. Oddly enough though, this has CarPlay, but not wireless Apple CarPlay, which is odd in the sense that this is a 2021. My dad has a 21 F-150 and he has wireless Apple CarPlay. I have to be plugged in for it here. Interesting, but anyway, we're just getting into the techie side of things when you should really be buying these because they're amazing performance cars. You could also get rear seats with this one if you did not go for the track pack, but the track pack did the rear seat delete for the sake of saving weight, even though I'm pretty sure it's about the same. All right, we'll get back in this guy before too long here, but let's go ahead and step out. Let's get ready to go, put some GoPros and all that stuff in the SVT GT500. Oh, another thing, because it's a key fob, keys in my pocket, you just go ahead and lock it like this, unlock it like that. So, basic tech that we take for granted now, but was not back in 2014. And ever since 2017, rear view backup cameras became mandated, so not on that one. I don't think it was even an option. And of course, you do get that right here. A very nice backup camera, if I do say so myself. All right, guys, so setting off in the 2014 SVT GT500. And yeah, I'll say it right now, I need to get back in the swing of making car videos, so a little rusty here. Trying out a GoPro on the dash, which video-wise looks pretty good, but audio is not so good. Trying to use this mic, recording it through my iPhone. So if it works out, it works out. All right, so yeah, bear with me. All right, so GT500 from 2014, the SVT generation. Man, I was in high school when this thing debuted, and at the time I was a huge car enthusiast, but I never really considered a Mustang. And this car I didn't consider purely because I was in high school and couldn't afford it, but it was the first Mustang that really spoke to me. I remember watching the Motor Trend videos on YouTube that are still out there. Cool thing is it was actually in this color scheme too, the ruby red with the white stripes. What I'm saying is it was the first Mustang that made an impression on me that really made me pay attention to, ooh, that's maybe a car I want to own at some point, and I'm glad I do now. but it was the first time I saw one in person. Even it was at like the parking lot of like at my high school stadium. Someone's dad probably had one, and it was in grabber blue. I mean, just a really cool car. And so there's like this level of, I wouldn't say nostalgia, because again, it's only 10 years old, but I don't know, a little bit of it, I could say. And I like the cross between, it's new enough to where, you know, it's reliable and it's not, you know, the AC works and all of that, but it still feels like old school, because I do want an old car at some point, and I will have one, I'm sure. But this, like I said, I keep saying this, but it does scratch a lot of itches, and that's one of them. It's like this old school feeling Mustang. And so I love that a lot. And of course, I'd want it no other way than with a 6-speed manual transmission. And this, of all 6-speed manuals, you know, it's pretty appropriate for this car. Not an overly heavy, ridiculously heavy clutch by any means. The throw of the shifter itself is pretty notchy. It's just really, really nice. 6 gears, pretty much overdrive. I think 5th gear might be as well. So you're not going to be using that unless you just want to save on fuel economy. And of the two, this one's more fuel efficient, if you could believe that as well. In fact, it had no gas guzzler tech, so funny enough. But yeah, overall, not a hard car to drive normally. And if you step on it with traction control on, it's also not hard to drive. But if you ever try to get ballsy and turn it off, I've done that a small handful of times, and you have to be awake. But yeah, I mean, right now I got it in 6th gear. We're doing about 60 miles an hour, and I'm going about 1,100 RPM. So it's really not a hard working engine when you don't want it to be. And as a cruiser, I will say these Cup 2s are a lot noisier than I'd like them to be, so I'd probably get some 4S's or something later. As a cruiser, though, it cruises, man. It's just a fun cruiser. It's plush. It's not as serious as the S550 chassis. Another thing, too, is the reactions both cars get. I would say when this gets reactions, it's more enthusiastic than the new GT500, but the new GT500 seems to get the reactions more often, put it that way. So when people see this, they really give the thumbs up. They're really a fan of the S197 GT500. It looks more, I don't know, maybe it's the color. I don't know, but when people spot this one, they seem to be a little bit more enthusiastic, give double thumbs up, all that kind of stuff, although more seldom. And whereas the GT500 of the newer one just gets a lot of eyes, and thumbs up certainly as well. Overall, really easy car to drive normally, but then even spiritedly, traction on, easy car to rev match. I'm not going to be braking here, I'm just cruising, but if I'm in 5th and I want 4th, jab the throttle, sounds good and rewarding. Accelerate with a little bit more pace, really easy car to do that. Really addicting car to step on the throttle, I will say. So that MPG rating, I probably won't get it because I'm making that supercharger work every now and then. Wish I could demonstrate that a little bit more here. We'll give it one good punch. I have other videos with this, so if you guys want like point of view drive and all that stuff, but we'll go ahead and give it one good punch here. Pretty easy to want to short shift this thing just because the pace picks up really quickly. So yeah, I end up shifting quite a bit early. It's so torquey in the way the suspension's set up. Again, not that efficient. It almost picks up like a freaking boat and just puts you back in the seat because the torque on this thing is just an absolute freaking monster. Again, rewarding downshift. Just overall, really, I don't know. It's about the experience, and this thing makes you feel like you're really, really cool. This thing just picks up and rocks like a freaking boat, like I said. It's just something that the other cars, like the 350 or the new 500, just don't do. But I probably drive this 1 mile for every 3 miles I put on the 500, which is a fancy way of saying I probably drive the new 500 3 times more. That's not to say I like it 3 times more. It's a very odd thing. I don't know. It's a very personal choice when you're going to choose between one of these two, and you have to just decide, do you like this feeling of like more accessible power and accessible cornering, and really, in short, accessible performance? Or do you like to kind of earn it, romp around, be rowdy? And in that case, this car is more for you. So I'm trying the best I can to demonstrate that in this video. If it doesn't work, I have other videos independent on both 500s. You can kind of tune into that. In the meantime, I say we segue from this to the new 500 while showing a point of view drive piece from both of them. So check it out, and I'll meet you guys on the new 500. when you have a soundtrack like that and it snaps off the shifts, that almost adds this other excitement that you don't get from a manual. Two totally different things we're talking about here. I don't want someone to think that I'm all team automatic here, but I'll tell you what, there's just some cars that exist. This one could have gone both ways, admittedly, but some cars exist where, yes, the idea of a manual is cool, but I feel like they're really more their own thing and a cohesive package in car with the pedal shift. And I never would have thought the day would come I said that about a Mustang, whether it's a Shelby GT500 or whatever. But I get to say that about this car after driving it a little over 5,000 miles is really, sometimes I have the feeling to drive something that's accessible performance, as easy as pulling a paddle, and it has that snap and a crack off of upshift and sometimes downshifts even. And it's really engaging in a different way that manual isn't. That being said, more often than not, I'll prefer a manual, but this car isn't any less of a fun car because of the paddle shifters, because the dual clutch is just that good. So hopefully that made sense. Some of you guys will always want manuals and manuals only. Can't, argue that because manuals are the way most of the time. But I guess I'm just really, really fortunate that I get to pick and choose on a day-to-day basis what kind of experience I want. And I'll tell you what, sometimes paddle shift is just kind of the move. And in this kind of platform, with this suspension setup, this power and everything, this transmission just mates up so freaking nicely. Once again, short shifting there just to stay within the law, but damn, it picks up quick. And I have it in track mode, which turns off a little bit of the traction, but not all of it, so stability control is still working for me. Only twice I've ever turned all traction off in this thing, and I should do it more just to experience it in a safe manner, but damn, that's where you really see what 760 horsepower really feels like. Because up until then, it obviously limits it and manages the power, so you don't get all 760, but if you turn it all the way off, it'll do a freaking rolling burnout at like 50 or 60 miles an hour. I mean, it could get out from under you, and that's why I'm a little careful of turning traction off on this one. Actually, both of them, man, but if you ever get on them, both the SVT GT500 or this one, that's where you really feel the difference. Whereas if you step on the GT500 from, SVT, that feels like you are a cowboy in a rodeo. You're just kind of along for the ride, hoping the car behaves. This thing, you really feel like you're one with it, as cliche as that might sound, but definitely more scalpel feeling. Not quite scalpel like actual supercars, GT3 RSs, Huracan Performante, stuff like that, but close for a Mustang, which is the crazy part, which makes me think the freaking Mustang GTD has got to be something else. I would be genuinely brokenhearted if I am not selected for that bad boy. I did apply, so we'll see, but owning this thing, and loving it as much as I have, just wondering if there's anything out there that could be more, and that GTD is going to be that. Oh my gosh, no idea what that would make me feel like, because this car is just amazing. So, very different kinds of cars. I happen to drive this one more often. Big old pop on the upshift on that one. But that doesn't mean I like it more either. I mean, both of them are just really, really nice. I have to take into consideration what I paid for them too. I paid significantly less for the SVT GT500, which in itself is kind of an appeal towards it, but they just don't feel the same. They're the same make and model and moniker, Shelby GT500 from Ford, and they just don't feel like the same car at all. And that's not to say that one is better than the other. Technically one is, and that would be this one, but from an experience, they're both very, very different. So I don't know. I feel like most people watching have probably already decided on what they want, and maybe they just kind of like seeing them in motion through video, and can't blame you on that one. Well, you guys go ahead and let me know down in the comments below which one you prefer. If you own one, let me know your experience. If you don't own either and you plan to, let me know which one you prefer. Definitely curious to hear about it. But yeah, I know that was a pretty short drive with both of them, especially this one, but the fact is I just have enough videos out there with both of them. I'll still make some more videos. I got to get better at that. But I'll tell you what, next video will probably be a similar comparison between this and the GT350. Both S550 chassis, but different monikers between the 500 and 350. That should be pretty interesting because those two I love a lot. So in any case, as I'm backing up in my driveway and I'm trying to be careful while I back it in, I'll go ahead and stop the video now. Again, guys, I'll go ahead and close out the videos with some links to videos that you guys might like if you like this kind of stuff, point of view drives, or just other kinds of videos between the two cars. So that does it. Thanks so much for watching. See you guys soon for a comparison between this and the 350. So take care.